The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Welcome, everyone. This is Darlene Walnick, and I'm an independent consultant for farmers markets and food systems across the U.S., and I will be moderating the webinar today. Before I introduce the subject and the speaker, I'm going to give you a quick overview of the GoToMeeting technology in case you're new to it so you know how to use it. When you're registered, you were sent a link, and that's how you got here today, so that way you'll be able to see Colleen's presentation. You're also able to type in questions as they occur to you because of that. Although I will caution that I've noticed a lot of people typing questions that are then answered in the next minute or two, so you may want to hold off for a second and make sure it's not answered. But feel free to type in questions. I'm going to be monitoring those questions, and then when Colleen is done, I'm going to ask her those questions. If we run out of time, we'll have her type answers, and those answers will be sent to everybody in a PDF along with links to the recorded webinar and any other relevant links we talk about. So the subject today is obviously very timely, as I'm sure many of you are thinking about your end of season or end of year reports, whether to funders or to your own food community. And this report that we're going to talk about today, along with others that came out this year, like Farmers Market Coalition's FMPP research, or the recent National Food Hub Survey that was done by Michigan State and the Wallace Center, are all good examples of compiling data that show the impact of local food systems. And all of that data can help us all report back to our communities and, quite timely, help us advocate for a good farm bill. Let us hope. So if you're thinking about what data you might want to collect and how to use it, I always recommend that people start with the Farmers Market Coalition and others triple bottom line. How does your market benefit its farmers, its shoppers, and the larger civic community? Looking at that framework allows you a multitude of ways to think about potential measurements, and that can be complicated. So also, another link we're going to send you is a link to a potential project that FMC is working on called the Market Metrics that is on a Night News Challenge page, which if they are successful in getting that support, it's going to allow FMC to craft a data collection tool for markets to use to start to look at data in simple ways and gather that data. So we're going to send you that link, take a look at that, and support if you can, and certainly send comments to FMC if you things occur to you on that. Today we're going to hear from a state that no question has led the way in data collection and sharing that data with all of us. You know, many of us have used the reports in Washington State in the past, and now we have this report to add to that as well. To tell us about this report today, we're going to hear from Colleen Donovan. Colleen has worked with farmers since 2003, and since 2010 has coordinated research for the Washington State University's Small Farms Program and Farmers Market Action Team. She serves on the board of the Washington State Farmers Market Association and, along with Karen Kinney, co-authored the Washington State Farmers Market Management Toolkit in 2012. So we're very excited to have her with us, and we know that we're all going to learn a great deal from her today. So Colleen, why don't you take it away?
Thank you, Darlene, and thank you to all of the Farmers Market Coalition for hosting this today. And I'm really happy to be able to share some of the things that we've been learning here in Washington, and hopefully it will apply in some way to your own work and wherever you're located. And this comes out of a larger research project I just wanted to mention that was led by Marcy Ostrom and has lots of different components to it, but I wanted to focus on the farmer characteristics. And again, I realize this is specific to what we're doing, and I hope it will be relevant to you and spark some ideas or maybe affirm what you're doing already in your state. So I wanted to start by providing a tiny bit of context. Washington State has about 150 unique farmers market locations that are throughout the state, and as you can see by the bountiful carrots, really the markets are concentrated in the Puget Sound area around Seattle, where most of the population lives. We're also really fortunate in Washington State to have a strong state association, the Washington State Farmers Market Association, that was founded in 1979 and is still going strong today. And just in terms of agriculture, we have a very diverse agricultural base. There's over 39,000 farms in our state, 90% of which are classified as small farms. And I also wanted to really highlight that this research would not have been possible without the strong participation of the farmers markets and really taking a very strong participatory approach to doing this. We've formed a farmers market action team, and it includes really our leading market managers, the Washington State Farmers Market Association, a few other nonprofits, farmers, Washington State Department of Agriculture, and other researchers from Washington State University. And they all really work together to provide critical leadership to make this possible, to get it funded, and to make sure it stayed relevant. So I just really wanted to thank all of you who are on the call, who are part of that, and also to encourage some of you to search out similar partnerships if you have them available, or perhaps you're already doing them in your state. And the reason, we have our focus on farmers, of course, is what's a farmer's market without a farmer? But we're also busy, and there's a lot going on, and there's a lot of really important demands on your time and what we're doing, and so it's important to take a minute to think about the farmer's perspective. And we know that farmers markets have a whole variety of different motives and missions. And as you can see from this, from our market manager survey data here, supporting farmers markets, providing fresh food and healthy foods really are what drives our markets. And it's, another reason to really reflect on the farmer perspective. We can't take that for granted. And you can see on the slide, these are some of our specific questions. But again, I want to emphasize why focus on the farmer perspective. And we have to remember that in 2013, farmers have more marketing options than they have in the past. They have CSAs, they have buying clubs, there's food hubs, there's more independent retails and co-ops. And so there's the small direct marketing farmer of 2013 may be interested in going to the farmers market, but they also have other options. And also selling at farmers markets is increasingly complicated, not just on the production side, but with application forms, health department permits, state regulations, food safety requirements that are a moving target, insurance, and just more and more competition for the local food dollar. And we also find that the cost of going to farmers markets is really factoring into farmers' decisions about where to sell. And it could be a function simply of gas and travel, or all the multiple fees, or the time it takes. So there's just a kind of a complex ecosystem that they live in and make their decisions in, and we have to really understand what's going on so that we can have strong markets in the future. And in addition to all the very fine academic and internal questions, there's also some really big claims and big issues that pop up in the media. And you can see a few, sample headlines here. And these aren't from some dodgy blog that's angry at farmers markets. These are from National Public Radio, the Wall Street Journal, and other mainstream sources. And hopefully you don't have to deal with too many in your neck of the woods. But the point is that they are out there, and having your facts in your hand is a very effective way to respond when these surprises come up. Or alternatively, and perhaps better yet, it's a great way to be proactive with your local media if you can really document what's going on and be out there in the lead with the story. I also wanted to touch on the fact that every farmer's market can collect some level of information on their farm vendors. And yes, large university-based research projects are great if they're available, but I'm very cognizant that they're not available to all of you, and so we have to think about other ways. And they're not the only answer either. It really is important for markets to be collecting their own information for what they need most urgently. And I wanted to highlight the work of Chris Curtis and the Neighborhood Farmers Market Alliance in Seattle around data collection as a model and an inspiration. And they have really led our state here in terms of data collection. And just to give you a few ideas, they in their vendor application every year, they include a 2-page vendor survey that asks questions about how they're doing and getting their direct feedback, whether that cooking demonstration or other event, what did it affect their business? What has the organization done well to help that vendor succeed? What can the market be doing to help that vendor? And so these are questions that they are open-ended and able to ask. They ask for the vendor's opinions on ways to attract shoppers, about what their perspective is on the overall product mix, as well as, what do they think works best in terms of promotion. So this is a way to enlist the support of the vendors in helping with some really key management decisions. And it also inadvertently helps highlight to the vendors some of those behind-the-scenes jobs that the market has been doing on their behalf. There's another section about farm information, and it asks about whether or not they have certified organic land, numbers of acres, and miles that they travel to market, their percentage of the farm income that sells from markets, employees, another marketing channel. So this is a very, very sophisticated approach, and one that they've used very effectively. And I just wanted to show you here, this is an excerpt of a portion of their annual statistical reports or stat sheets. And it's very effective in terms of helping with management decisions and being able to tell their story to the public, to policymakers, to other vendors, to the neighboring businesses who occasionally are grumpy. And of course, being able to really back up their impact, and they do a truly excellent job. And of course, we know that all of you have lots of demands on you already, and so I realize that by looking at all this, you might be sitting at home groaning at the thought of adding anything new to your job. And so I want to recognize that not all markets can handle this level of additional work. However, I think that sometimes we can, back it up and say, okay, well, what can we do? And in Washington, about 2 years ago, Karen Kinney, who is the executive director of our state association, and I, with about 40 different market managers in Western Washington, had this conversation about, okay, so what can the one manager market do that's realistic? And so we came up with 12 different, what we called market vitals. And this is, not to say this is what you should do, but this is what we are trying on here and what there seems to be some utility to. And so in order to make it on the list, the statistic or the vital indicator needed to be realistic for a one-manager market, a one-manager, one-market operation to collect. It needed to be a meaningful manager. It needed to have some purpose. And it also needed to be able to be aggregated with other markets so that the idea was if everybody was on the same page, very similar to what the Farmers Market Coalition is doing at the national level, then if everybody was doing the same thing, then you could aggregate for the county or the region or the neighborhood or whatever was appropriate scale. So I just picked out a few up on the slide that relate to farmers. There's a link up there that has all 12. And I guess these are the kind of indicators that, as the Farmers Market Coalition has pointed out, that they're kind of available and hit or miss. They're in slivers. And according to the survey of the Farmers Market Promotion Program grantees that the Farmers Market Coalition recently did, grantees have reported that an average of 34% increase of the number of participating agricultural producers or farmers since they received their award. So what they're doing is showing just this one on the slide here, it's number 5, the number of farm vendors. So they're showing how that's growing. And again, if you just do that one piece, then that could be part of the larger puzzle that we're putting together. And I guess my last point here is that sometimes by just getting a few pieces of information, you can combine them to get more pieces, so it looks like you've done even more. So for example, if you know your total farm sales and your total number of farm vendors, you can get your average. And so sometimes you can, just a few pieces can go a long way. And I did want to touch on this issue of collecting sales from vendors because I know it's a very it's one of those issues that people have very strong feelings about. There's a lot of practical issues. There's a lot of different philosophies. There's different practices, and that there's very real resistance in some cases. So I'm definitely not prescribing that you change what you do, but in our context, it's been very effective, and that's just what I wanted to tell you today. Our state association asked for the sales data from members' markets, and some are definitely estimates, and some markets take the job very, very seriously. And it has been one of the very few consistent pieces of data that we've had statewide over the years, and it's been used very effectively. So, so while it may not work for you, for us it's been very, very effective. And there's a few tips in the white box on how to do it, and that could probably be a whole other webinar. And so I just wanted to highlight here how we have used that information. So in the aggregate, during our Farmers Market Week, the State Department of Agriculture can make us, say, hey, reported sales of 40 million in 2012. And so that's how we, an example of how we've been able to use that, and that really gets people attention. Now I also wanted to make a second point, and that sometimes by touting sales, it can be a bit of a double-edged sword, or any success really, because it affirms that everything's going great in the farmers market world, and they don't really realize all of the hard work and challenges that still exist. So sometimes providing a bit of context can be helpful. So it's like, hey, sales are up, but due to all the hard work and that's going on behind the scenes. And here's our survey. So again, I just wanted to highlight that this is what we've done at the statewide level through our university research, and that hopefully some of this will be applicable to you at your market or perhaps in other projects you're working on. It went out to over 1,200 unique farm businesses, and that sold at least one farmer's market. Which nobody had that number before. We had to build the list, which was kind of painful. It was a huge job, but it didn't exist before, so we had to find every single farm vendor at the state. And I wanted just to emphasize here that the participation of the farmers market is absolutely key in making this possible, not just in terms of building a list, but in knowing what the relevant questions are, and outreach to make sure farms know that we're legit and why this matters. And again, I just want to say thanks to any market on the webinar that helped with this. So just to get us going here, I just picked out a few specific data points, and I just wanted to highlight, hey, what questions would we ask? Because you thought answers were hard. Questions are hard. Sometimes getting the right questions are really tricky. And I definitely learned some lessons along the way here too. And then how do we, again, to our point, how do we strategically use this information, and what are some things that that we're learning? The full report is not yet out, but coming soon this fall, and we will definitely make sure that you have a link if you're interested. So to kick us off here, I wanted to start with just the farm, what's kind of technically called the farm typology. And this is based on the USDA's Economic Research Service typology, which they just changed. But let's keep going. And so in this case, what we asked was, what was your total gross farm income for all agricultural products in 2011? And we had over 500 respondents to the survey, so we feel like it's a fairly good-sized sample. And in this case, the answers were check boxes. So as a rule, any kind of sensitive information like income, a checkbox with a range makes it easier for people to answer and more likely to answer. The downside is it makes it much harder to do an average, but at least you get that information. We did have 476 respondents here. And so the question is, how do you strategically use this? Well, this is, since it's a USDA kind of point of reference, it's really good for making comparisons at the national level or between states. It's helpful when you're talking to USDA or your State Department of Ag agencies or your land grant. They care about this sort of thing. It could be helpful if you're applying for an FMPP grant or maybe a specialty crop or other USDA grant program. And then what do we, if we look at this, what does this tell us too? I mean, what does this tell us about farmers market farmers, at least here in our state? And as you can see, yeah, most are small farms, about the same proportion as statewide overall, about 89, 90%. But here's the point here, is that not all of them are small farms. There's 11% of the farm vendors that have incomes over $250,000, and some are over $500,000 and even $1 million. And so the bottom line here is that there's a wide range of farmers, and I think that's going to be a theme we go back to over and over again, is that there are all kinds of farmers market farmers. There's in lots of different nuanced ways, and that's part of what we're trying to learn here. So there's a wide range of different farm incomes. And then we get to another data point, which is farm jobs. And we know it's important to ask about employment, and because it's a particularly relevant and hot issue politically, especially when we have high unemployment such as now. And Chris Curtis and the Neighborhood Farmers Market Alliance have really effectively used their job data from just their 7 markets. So we wanted to ask this at the state level. And a couple of points here. One is that, wow, we had to figure out what counted as a farm job, right? And what do we mean by the farm? There's the farm, there's the farmer, there's a farm family, there's our farm vendor, there's the farm operation, and these all kind of can have some subtle differences. And so the important thing is to think through, well, who do you really mean? And for us, we asked about the farm. And so here you can see there's family workers, there's folks that are hired, and then item C here on the slide, it says people hired to sell at farmers markets. That's a really direct connection to the farmers market world. And so how can you use this type of information? And again, we're following in the footsteps of others who have collected it before us. But it really is a powerful indicator of economic impact, and for any scale, whether it's county or your state or your food shed or whatever works for you. And then from a kind of more pragmatic perspective, it also speaks to farm capacity. So if we know that there's only year-round, there's family farm, workers, there's an average of 1.8 per farm. We have to be mindful of how much they can do and how much time they have. So some other takeaways here. One of the things that jumps out, and maybe you're thinking, you probably can think of some others as you're looking at this, but there's more seasonal labor or employment farm jobs than year-round, of course. There's the seasonal definitely has more hired folks than family, but the year-round has more family jobs than hired, and so it's an interesting picture. And the last point, just to kind of highlight what we're learning, is if we look at that line that talks about interns or apprentices, wow, that's a pretty impressive number here, over 200 if we add them together. And those are all educational opportunities that these farms are providing. So we have to remember that these these farms are also, part of educating and growing the next generation of farmers as another part of the benefit of what they're doing. Okay, so the next one, and it would be a lot of fun to be able to talk more interactively, but we'll keep going, is acreage. And we asked how many total acres did your farm use for all production, not just farmer's market, but for all production, because that gives us more of a scale of the farm. And we broke it out between acres owned and those that were leased or rented. And we found that there was a huge range, everywhere from 1.7 acres to 4,500 acres. And so there again, underlying that the farmer's market farmer is, a complicated character, and there is no average. Although we did put the average up there. But what I mean is that it's really hard to classify in one way. We have to really think these things through. So, and strategically, acres really appeals to your land grant. It appeals to anybody, it's a very strong agricultural indicator, farmland preservation interests, and so on. Your NRCS perhaps. And again, we see here we have an average of 66 acres. Now this, we also added all the acres up, and this was for 496 farm respondents. And that total was 30, this is the national day view of this number, I want you to know that. It's 32,600 acres, and that's, that all of a sudden, oh, just a bunch of small farmers, hobby farmers. Well, add them all together, that's a really significant chunk of land. So we want to really kind of show the total impact of markets and how they're affecting farms. I do have an acreage warning. My acreage warning is that because of the diversity of different types of farms, averages are super problematic, because let's think about it this way. If you were just talking about apples or pears or orchardists even, they're all fairly consistent, although, okay, for the sake of this conversation, they're all fairly consistent. If you talk about an acre of orchard, it's an acre of orchard. An acre of potatoes, it's an acre of potatoes. But in the farmers market world, there's a huge mix of different production types, everything from intensive hydroponic to rangeland. And so it's really kind of a tricky one. And so again, providing some context with your information is super helpful. Moving along, I have a few more here, and that is, so we also wanted to know, again, knowing the different marketing channels, knowing the complexity of selling at markets for farms in 2013, we wanted to know why are farmers choosing farmers markets? And so we asked, and this was, we asked them how important a variety of 9 different factors were their decision to sell at farmers markets in general, and then they could rate, 1 to 5 on a scale of importance. And what we found is that the number 1 in terms of importance was building relationships with other customers, which kind of surprised me. You always think, oh, they're going there for the sales only, but it was building relationships. And again, what we see here is a mix of motives. And so we have building relationships with customers. Okay, that's a real business motive. Number 2 was retail value for products sold. Okay, that's economic. But then we go to number 3, which is providing community with healthy food. That was very important to why farmers were selling at farmers markets, and so that speaks to their real values as well as who they are. And also, number 4 was having control over prices. Okay, so that's economic also. So again, the point here is that there's a whole mix of motives. And how could you use information like this? Well, it might help when you're recruiting vendors, and maybe there's you can speak to what they care about, and they can, if building relationships is important, maybe there's events or something as simple as providing name tags or something that you can do to help make sure they're achieving what they care about the most. Okay, and then we asked, okay, you're going to markets. Well, which markets are you selecting? So we asked about the criteria farmers are using to select specific markets. And these are the responses we provided, and then there was an other, of course. And what we see is that reasonable travel to the market was the top one, which as a market manager, yeah, it's hard to control that one for sure. But then we have some other ones about management, about market attracts serious shoppers, market is well managed. Of course, sales is always very important as well. So again, think about all of the, how your market, you want to recruit and retain the best possible vendors. What are they looking for? And so this gives us some insight into what farmers care about, what their perspective is. And I just want to highlight, over and over again, we're finding that having really strong and well-managed markets is very important to farmers. And I know that I'm sure your farmers have never complained, ever. But in some places, it can be quite a challenge. And also, if you have limited resources, a list like this or having this information could help you know where to focus. So again, going back to attracting serious shoppers is very important to farmers. If you have limited dollars and you have to make a choice about what you're doing, maybe really investing in a campaign to get those shoppers in would be a successful strategy for you. Okay, I have a few more of these. Okay, so this is another question that we asked about organic production. And again, organic tends to be a real proxy for larger environmental ethos and ideas and practices. So we asked this in 3 different ways, and I wanted to highlight this as a strategy because sometimes you can ask one question, it might lead you in one direction, but if you ask it a couple different ways, you can really get a strong idea about, is this really significant? And this is especially important if you think there's one particular statistic you want to hang your hat on it, so you want to really double check it. So we asked about their opinion. This was an agree or disagree statement, and about whether or not they agreed that food and fiber should be grown in ways that protect natural resources, even if it means lower production and profits. And well over half agreed or agreed strongly with that statement. Then we also asked about acres in production that were either certified organic but not certified, or other. And as you can see, certified organic was just over a quarter, 26%, and organic but not certified, which we know is loosey-goosey. We don't know what that means, but it, again, evokes this notion of some sort of environmental stewardship and practice. That was well over half. And so it helps us to kind of think through the practices of the farmer. And then last, we asked, do you identify products at your market as organic? And a quarter said yes. So, and it kind of syncs up in that quarter is about the same as the certified ground. So, and again, strategically knowing this, you can align your values with shoppers, with service organizations, with funders, with other vendors, maybe with a particular event, if there's an Earth Day or whatever is happening in your area. And it also can strategically be used to differentiate your growers from the competition, from the grocery store, from the co-op, or maybe not the co-op, but from other vendors, other local farmers. There's more and more local farmers. So how do we differentiate our farmers at the farmers markets? And perhaps by being able to highlight their strong environmental practices, it could be a way to get more, to again reaffirm how they're important. This next slide is about about the importance of farmers market to food assistance programs, and of course we know if there's just loads of good work going on around the farmers market nutrition program as well as the supplemental nutrition assistance program, or SNAP. And so we wanted to once again get the farmer's perspective on these programs. We know they can be cumbersome, that we know there could be paperwork. There might be token programs, so it requires a bit of motivation to participate. So we asked 2 questions for both the Farmers Market Nutrition Program and for SNAP in terms of a scale of not important to important. And one of the questions was, how important is it to you to have these programs to enable low-income and or senior shoppers to buy your products? And then the second question was about, the straightforward economic in terms of increasing farm sales. And so as you can see from the slide, there was very strong motivation to have low-income people and or seniors buy their products. And again, it's speaking to the more complicated values and what's driving farmers to be able to participate in these programs. And which isn't to say that farm sales aren't important. Of course they're important. And as you can see, that was definitely an important factor as well. But we're just saying that, hey, this shows that there's a lot going on here, and let's pay attention, let's understand it, and what their values are. And strategically, this could be, really important in terms of advocating for federal support, maybe conversations at the state level with the folks who are administering these programs, and there's lots of different ways that you can, help to maybe it might help you to decide to go through the process to get set up at your market. This next piece that we found from our survey is a category called limited resource farmer, and that's a designation by the USDA. Maybe some of you have run into it. There's socially disadvantaged, there's limited resource farm. It can get pretty confusing what's what. But in this case, it has to do with household income, as well as a few other variables. And so one of the questions we asked was, we pulled out that income threshold, and we asked, okay, is your household income less than 20? In this case, it was in 2011, $23,450. And I was really surprised to see that it came out as 28% of our farm vendors said yes to that question. And of course, it begs the question, we need to look into this further. But that was fairly sobering to me anyway. And it kind of suggests, again, that we need to look into this more. We know that USDA cares about this information. On the strategic side, it could also mean that it might position the market well to participate in some of those grant programs that serve limited resource farmers. On a management side, it might give you a bit of empathy in terms of some of their limited cash resources and capacity. And also what we can do as a whole to make sure that our farmers are making a living. And it also helps to think about how the importance of the business at the farmers markets ties back into these questions of poverty in the agricultural production areas and in other areas far from the metropolitan areas where sales are made. So it can be a very powerful piece to know about. And of course, we all care about farm profitability. So this next slide, and this is my last kind of data point from our survey that I wanted to highlight. And this is about the farmer's outlook on selling at farmers markets over the next 5 years. And the reason why this was important is because there was a real concern, or there is a concern, again, going back to this notion that in 2013, farmers have different options. There's a lot of challenges. Where are we going to get our farmers for the future farmers markets, for next 5 years from now, from 10 years from now, and what do they need, and what do farmers markets need to look like? And so, and what are their thoughts? Is there a mass exodus, or are they going to be there? And so fortunately, what this data suggests is that there most will, sell at the same markets or sell at more markets. So over, if we add in, that's about, if we add the green bars, it's about 72%. So we know that most farm vendors are going to continue to have farmers markets as part of their business strategies. And that's fairly helpful. And again, we need to look very carefully and say, okay, what other questions does this raise? And what about those that are going to sell at fewer markets or stop selling? Is there anything there? Is there any kind of kernel of a trend that we need to pay attention to so that we can make sure that there's a strong vendor base for the future farmers markets? And likewise, again, kind of going back to the idea of asking kind of multiple questions along the same vein, we did ask an opinion question about whether or not they agreed that farmers markets will provide strong sales for Washington farmers over the next 10 years. And here 70% agreed or strongly agreed. So we do have some optimists out there. So that's good and that's encouraging, and I still think it's important to kind of pay attention to this sort of indicator of the future. So now you've heard from a few data points from our survey, and I just wanted to end by kind of just reiterating some of the ways to strategically use whatever data you have or have access to. And of course, one of the major ways is to tell the farmers market story, to tell the farm story, to promote the markets. And farmers, you are all excellent at promoting your market, and this could just give you more tools to maybe do it in a bit more focused way. And so whether it's aimed at shoppers or the media, you can deploy particular data to tell your story. And we have a couple of examples on the slide here. One is a poster that I saw at the Fulton Street Market in Grand Rapids, Michigan this summer, and that was done by Michigan State University Extension, which I thought was very impressive. And here they have farmers market jobs per $1 million of revenue earned. I'm not even sure what that means, but it's very impressive on that poster at their market. And so I think that's the point here, is that you can really trot some of these things out in very cool infographics and so on. And then the second example comes from California, from the Agricultural Institute of Marin. And it's a farmer profile, and it says, no pests were harmed in making of this ad. And again, it's reiterating that ethos, that environmental ethos. It's detailing production practices. It's things that it's tapping into things we know that consumers care about, and it really can bolster the power of your story. And in addition, as markets, and for those who have as part of their mission to do public education, it really reinforces that job. It can also help recruit different supporters. And I don't want to forget to mention, another really important audience for this are your vendors themselves. Whether it's helping them to have some benchmarks for their own how they fare at the market, such as the statistics sheet we saw earlier, or it also can help them, see how they're part of an overall market team, and they have a really important role to play as part of that team, as part of that growth. So, popping this into a year-end report, however you can do that is really critical to, again, building that relationship with farmers by educating them about the market as a whole and giving back what they've shared. I'm sure a lot of you have great ideas on that. The second kind of real strategy in terms of deploying your whatever research and data you have available is, just simple market management questions. There's tons of questions you face in terms of knowing where to invest your limited budget, policies around fees or applications or vendor mixes or what have you, as not to mention all the market day operations questions. So again, having that vendor feedback is really important. And as I mentioned with the Neighborhood Farmers Market Alliance application, where they ask, hey, how are we doing? How, basically, give us feedback on the decisions we've made and how we should make future ones. And so I just pulled out two pieces of data from our research here just to kind of emphasize the market management complexity. And this, again, is from the farmer perspective. And the first on the table there on the, I guess it's on the left, is ways different markets charge vendor stall fees. And this is the simple version of this information, and it was so complicated. There were flat fees and percentages, or flat fees or percentages, and then there was some variability, whether depending on your vendor type or depending on how many weeks you're there, and it was just this combination with the membership fee, or it gave me great empathy for the farm vendor or any vendor trying to remember how each market they participated in and charged their fee. And it was just, again, it was looking at things from the vendor perspective and just saying, wow, that's a lot of different ways to charge vendor fees. And I had a lot of empathy for understanding why they might be confused from time to time or have a hard time remembering. And it kind of raises the question, okay, well, why is that way? Is it a legacy of how markets have done it, or is there some, what are some practices around there? And then the pie chart over there is this question of, we also wanted to know numbers of farmers market locations that the farm sold at. And so then again, this is saying, okay, you interact with your farm vendor at your market or maybe your group of markets. Well, they're also going to a number of different markets. Again, this point from the farmer perspective. And so we had, 45% went to one market. Okay, they're fairly straightforward. But then there's a large portion that go to 2 to 5 markets, and a smaller portion but significant that are going to 6 to 10 markets, and then there's a smaller but important group that goes to 11 or more markets. And so, again, remembering that they're at a lot of markets, and so what is that? How does that help you to empathize and understand when you're making your decision? And of course, data is incredibly important when you are doing any sort of advocacy or policy work, and whether it's at your local level and trying to get your street permit situation straightened out, or at the state level, or even at the national level, or as Darlene mentioned earlier, the Farm Bill level. Data is extremely important. And here we have a photo of a recent event during our 2013 Farmers Market Week at the Bremerton Farmers Market. And look, this is so exciting. We have Karen Kinney in the middle there, who's our state executive director of the Farmers Market Association. And we have the blue arrows, our market manager and a board member for that market. And then the white arrows are all very, very important people, policymakers, I think, elected officials. And so they're all gathered around at the market. And in that folder, there's blue folders. See the blue folders? Very exciting. So there is data in those folders. And Karen is speaking with data. You can't hear her, but it's true. And it's about the importance of farmers markets and the importance in particular about food access programs. And so, again, this is one more reason why it's important to think about collecting information and having some data. It really does make you look professional and credible. Look how professional everybody looks. And credible gives you great credibility, especially when you're speaking to policymakers. And it helps with just helps inform things as well. One of the interesting phenomena I find with farmers markets is that people are so familiar with the markets they go to that they, understandably, they feel very comfortable and familiar with their markets. And so they think there's a tendency to think they know everything about markets and that we already know, we have markets figured out. But the reality is that there's a lot of subtlety and there's a lot of differences, and every market is different. And so having that bigger picture is really important. And my last kind of point I wanted to hone here in terms of the strategy for deploying your data is, of course, fundraising or resource development or raising support. And I provided just one example here, and that is that of our survey respondents, 51% were women. And they could be an individual woman farmer, such as Cheryl here, or maybe they farmed with a partner. But there's a really strong presence of women farmers compared to other sectors of agriculture. And so the farmers markets really could really highlight this and know that you can use this one piece of information to really focus on getting support from, maybe it's a women's business organization or small business development centers or whatever the case may be. But you can use that and shine a light on it to say, hey, you know, our markets really support women entrepreneurs. So let's, you know, so that's a little, you know, people might not realize that. And so you can, through your research and through your work, discover something new to highlight in your fundraising, and really kind of maybe make connections that weren't there before. And whether it's at the federal and state program, women are considered a socially disadvantaged category of farmer by USDA in some programs. Private foundations may be focused on women, individual support, whatever the case may be. And it doesn't have to be women. It could be that it's small business entrepreneurship. It could be that limited resource farmer piece. It could be that they really care about the environment. Whatever is relevant to you, but highlighting that one connection might open doors to other areas of support that hadn't been connected before. And then also in fundraising, as we know, funders tend to love stories and they love numbers, and having them just really shows and underlines your expertise and also your capacity or ability to measure your success. So those really are things that that can potentially help you to leverage your market and to get more external support. So I just wanted to end here by hitting a couple of key points that, you know, it's really important to get the farmer's perspective. There is no average. It's important that markets, you know, do some data collection, although maybe doing it in a realistic way. Lots of different audiences for this data and ways to use it strategically, and then really sharing back with your farmers what you're learning to help them and to help your relationship. So with that, I'm going to end, and just really wanted to say thanks again to the Farmers Market Coalition for hosting this, and we will be able to send out the final report once it's live.
Oh, Colleen, that was so great. Such a great presentation. I mean, really, it's interesting to hear how Washington State has thought about the data. I mean, again, you brought up some great points around how one could use this data, and as you know, we talked about already. There's just so many ways you're going to be able to mine this data for years. I look forward to seeing the entire report. One of the main questions I think I wanted to make sure we asked was, you talk, of course, as we're talking about a farmer survey, how in Washington State are you actually defining that farmer? Do you say farm? You did a, you know, you're asking farmers at markets this question. How did you define farmer?
Here in Washington, we followed what our state association has what's called the Roots Guidelines that defines 5 different vendor categories: farmer and farmer processor, food processor, artisan crafter, and prepared food. And so for us, a farmer is somebody who has grown their product in Washington and who've grown it themselves and is selling it directly.
Mm-hmm. Good, okay. Yeah, it's interesting because you talk about building that database of 1,200 farmers market farmers. You talked about reaching out to the markets, obviously. Were there other ways that you gathered the information and the people for the database besides contacting farmers? What other, I mean, besides contacting markets, how did you build that 1,200 farmers market database?
One of the key ways was also looking at all of the different directories in our state networking with, we have the Tilth Producers of Washington, anybody who's sold at a farmer's market, networking with our extension offices, networking with the farmer's market nutrition program that authorizes farmers to sell at farmers markets, and basically it was a from scratch adventure, and again, it was kind of an all of the above approach, but really the farmers markets were our most valuable approach.
Yeah, that's great. Well, and somebody has sent a link to the Roots guidelines that Washington State has, so that's going to be on the PDF everybody gets. So I appreciate that from Jennifer Brown. You know, we wanted to know also, you talked a little bit about USDA's ERS survey and data. What other surveys did you look at, or did you think were useful to look at? What questions you asked, or the type of data to collect?
Yes, USDA was very helpful. We went through and just scanned any sort that I could find. I could dig up a list if that's helpful for everybody. And some of the surveys were done by independent consultants, maybe in the Portland area, or maybe they were through rapid market assessments. And some were very much at the market level, and then some were at the more formal university-based approach, and some were at the USDA. So I can definitely come up with a list, but I tried to, you know, go for all sources that were, you know, potentially had some good information and some good good questions. It's very hard to keep a survey short, and it's very important to keep a survey short. So I think the hardest thing was really trying to narrow down the questions and focus on what, and that's where the Farmers Market Action Team was also very important, saying, okay, well, we need to focus on this and not that, and that's lovely, but you can't do it, and so, or we have to be very respectful of the farmers' time and make it so that they will actually do it. We also, with the one benefit with USDA, I would say, is that some of the questions we structured in such a way so that we would be able to compare state to state. So we wanted to be able to say, hey, well, we know, how do we compare nationally? What other points of reference do we have? So we have put our data in that larger context.
Well, you know, and then you touched a little bit on averages, and we talked a little bit about this. With such a wide range of information that you've got, that you've received in this, are you planning on using averages or median or pulling data out more specifically around you know, different types of farmers? How do you see is the best use of this data? Just already, it's by looking at what you think is going to be the best way.
I think that's part of why I said the results are preliminary, because I think we need to think that through. I think in some cases an average is a very, it kind of going back to this idea of strategically deploying your data. So if you know, if you can trot out a number, hey, 66%, 66 acres are, you know, so on average for the farm. If that's useful in that context, then we can have it available. But I think we need to dig closer in some cases, because we also don't want to fall into that trap of saying, on the one hand, a farmer's market farmer is a very heterogeneous category. Let's understand that better. And on the other hand, saying, oh, and here's the average. So I think we'll have to tease out and balance that, and then again go back to this idea of when is it strategic to use average, and when is it empirically important to use it.
Yeah.
But I think that's the work to be done.
Yeah, that sounds great. Well, actually, I can't believe it. We're right on time. We're right at the top of the hour, and most of the questions that have been asked, we've answered those. And we'll have some more questions that are maybe more detail in our PDF that we'll send out. I think, are there any last thoughts you want to bring up, Colleen, before we head out?
No, I just appreciate everybody listening, and I just wish I could hear from all of you about what you're doing.
Right. Well, I think, well, I'm sure you will, actually, and I feel like that's probably where the next step will be. Once the report is out, I'm sure everybody will be calling you and asking you for more information and having you in. I can't thank you enough for doing this and for sharing your preliminary report with us, and we look forward to seeing the end of it. Thank you, everybody, for joining the webinar, and we'll be sending out a link to the recorded webinar and a PDF along with questions and answers to you by probably this week. Thanks a lot.